I'm Sarah Cooper. I'm a general manager in AWS's IoT organization in something called outcome-driven engineering. I also wear a second hat. This happens a lot at Amazon. I am the alliance lead for Volkswagen Digital Production Platform with my co-lead, Uli Petri from Volkswagen. We're going to walk you through today a little bit about how we're co-developing and working together on automotive production and manufacturing. But first, how many people have Volkswagen Group cars? Oh, that's good. I'm going to ask at the end of the presentation too, because I want to know how many people didn't realize their vehicle was a Volkswagen Group car. That's right, everybody out there with a Bugatti, that's you. So you all, well, actually, I shouldn't assume that. How many folks got a chance to listen to Andy's keynote today? A few. Or Twitter. I had to watch on Twitter. It was an incredible litany of innovation. Just one new service, new major feature after another. It's almost dizzying, the pace of innovation at Amazon. Part of what we have done in this program that you're going to hear about today is we've partnered with Volkswagen in order to bring that innovation into the real world, into our cars, into manufacturing, and to really understand how can we transform together the automotive industry. We're going to talk a little bit about some of the context behind that, what's happening. How many people here work in automotive? Am I preaching to the choir? Oh boy. Oh good, especially that session. You'll have to bear with me for a minute. This is what you live and breathe. But just because we also have some other folks in the crowd, we'll talk a little bit about what's happening in the automotive industry and why this is an incredibly rich time for disruption and transformation, which is really the motivation behind digital production platforms. So I'm going to hand over, after we talk a little bit of context, to Uli, who's going to walk us through what is DPP. It's not just awesome hoodies, but it is awesome hoodies, and talk a little bit about why Amazon and Volkswagen really are pioneering a new model, co-development of how we work together, what that means, why the two of us, and really what the big goals are that we're striving together to reach. We'll do a little bit of a deep dive, although there are some additional sessions tomorrow with technical deep dives. Hopefully that doesn't mean everyone just gets up and says, I want to see architecture. We'll give you an overview and some context for some of those sessions. Then we'll talk a little bit about next steps. So, automotive. I ask lots of questions. How many people have electric vehicles? Good for you, a few. I suspect if we ask this next year, it'll be twice as many, if not 3 times as many. And the year after, we'll get to the point where almost everybody's hand is raised. I'm not going to ask about connectivity vehicles. Unless you're really driving a classic, you have a connected vehicle of some kind. It does not count if you take your cell phone and you stick it on the dash of your classic car. That's not quite a connected car. Autonomous, again, this is another vector that we hear an awful lot about in the automotive space. But if you're a manufacturer, you're all of a sudden going from 25 years ago, where the majority of the innovation that you did was on the combustion engine, and the delightful experience of, ooh, I can't remember how many horsepower under the Bugatti Chiron. It's like 1436. It's something around that. Like, that's insane. I love horses. That's a lot of horses. And that used to be the measure of a vehicle. And today, auto manufacturers now have to innovate across electric, across connectivity, across autonomous features. They've got to compete with mobility, just generally. I use Uber an incredible amount. I travel a lot. Lyft, Scoot. There's also an incredible number of demographic changes going on. These are the technology-based disruptors happening in automotive. But we've also got different buying patterns. Turns out people younger than me like more customization than I do, according to the statistics. I don't know if that's true. I like a really custom experience myself. But it's really impressive how much change the automotive industry has to be able to embrace these days. And really, all of that rolls into manufacturing, production, supply chain. You can't produce an electric car in the volumes that we want to consume them. You can't add new features without first dealing with production. And the pace of these innovations is constantly increasing. It's like continuous delivery of vehicles, which Volkswagen does quite handily. So why Amazon? Turns out we actually manufacture an awful lot of products ourselves. Certainly our Echo devices, Kindles, a lot of our Amazon basics. We have an incredible amount of delivery. Our fulfillment centers are, small, tiny, really simple robotics. There are a couple people who make these things happen in the front row, so I was kind of goading them. In fact, these are massive operations on a global scale. Incredible implementations of robotics run by AI. You're going to hear a little bit about AI today. IoT underneath. How do you run AI if you don't have the high quality data? Guess what? You got to get it from the equipment, hence the Internet of Things. All of this comes together on our own operations, and we're bringing a lot of that knowledge and a lot of that experience to the relationship with Volkswagen. It also informs a lot of the products that you see us deliver. So, I don't know how many people really understand the breadth and depth of innovation happening at Volkswagen. I already mentioned the Chiron. That's 304 miles per hour, the fastest vehicle on record. For context, the Bugatti Chiron fastest speed was about 40% of the speed of light at sea level. A vehicle went 40%. In my mind, I've got a little C, I'm a physicist. I got a little C and, 40%. That's incredible. Sound. Thank you. See, this is why you have to have your colleagues in the front row so they can make sure that it took me a minute. I'm like, wait a minute, that's not possible. I guess I better go back to physics. Volkswagen is also bringing out incredible number of electric vehicles. Right? I don't know how many. Did anybody reserve a Porsche Taycan? Anybody? No? Anybody want to? They're super cool. A few hands. Good. A few more reservations coming. Considerably ahead of expectations, the reservations reached the 30,000 mark. That's a new premium electric vehicle on the market with an incredibly new design. But it's not just in vehicle, it's production, right? I think number one, right? Number one, now I'm going to check. Now I don't trust myself with facts. I got to check. Number one, yeah, all right. Number of vehicles produced in 2018. So again, multiple factors. You've got Amazon on one hand, lots of innovation on the technology side, lots of innovation on our physical operations side. Volkswagen, incredible amount of innovation both in vehicles, and we're going to hear more about the innovation on the production platform. So with that, please welcome Uli Petri. Uli, as I mentioned, is my Alliance co-lead. He's also a general manager in global IT for Volkswagen. Uli, you can correct everything else that I just...
I don't have to. You know so much about cars. And thank you, Sarah. Thanks for the introductions, and I fully agree. This is a perfect opportunity for a partnership. Now, Andy Jassy today in his keynote talked a lot about transformation and how large enterprises use cloud technology to transform their business. And this session really picks up on that. In this session, Sarah and I will talk about how Volkswagen and AWS partner to build a cloud platform that will help us to transform the way we do production in Volkswagen and also beyond in the broader context of manufacturing. Now, let's get started and talk a bit about the size, scale, and complexity of Volkswagen. As you know, Volkswagen is one group, consisting of 12 brands, including the volume brands such as Volkswagen and the premium brands such as Audi and Porsche. We have 122 factories around the globe, and from a sales perspective, we have been very successful in 2018, scoring our next consecutive all-time high, both in terms of vehicle sales and in terms of revenue. And looking at these figures, you can certainly imagine how complex it is to do production in such a large-scale, multi-brand, and global environment. Now, Sarah already talked about the massive transformation that is currently going on in the automotive industry. Vehicles becoming autonomous, electrified, and connected. And we have to find a way to accelerate innovation for our products. And from a manufacturing perspective, manufacturing has to evolve in parallel to support this accelerated innovation for our vehicles. And also, for us as an OEM, to cope with the business disruption that is currently going on in our industry, we also need the financial flexibility to invest into our products. And that, at the end of the day, for us means profitability is key. And for us, as a volume manufacturer, producing more than 11 million vehicles per year, you can certainly imagine the huge impact production has on our profitability. And just to give you an example, for example, in 2018, vehicle construction accounted for 2/3 of our capital investments, and it accounts for 1/3 of our workforce. And these figures apply for Germany only. In our Volkswagen sites abroad, this share tends to be even higher. And that is why the brand Volkswagen, with the Production Strategy 2025, has recently launched a very ambitious program. And one of the key pillars of this program is to increase productivity by 30% over the next 5 years. And 30% is anything but a small gradual improvement. And the question obviously is, how will we realize this vision? Now, this shift in productivity really requires a step change. It requires smart factories, a fully connected production and fully integrated and digitalized production processes spanning all domains. And that includes logistics and parts delivery. It includes integration and optimization of our production processes based on the data we generate on the shop floor. It includes energy efficiency management solutions for our plants, and much more. And this is exactly where the digital production platform comes into play. The digital production platform is our platform to digitalize our production and production processes. Now, from a technical perspective, the digital production platform is a powerful industrial IoT platform spanning both private and public cloud, providing a common set of shared services in the field of plant and device connectivity, helping us to combine the data we generate in our machines, plants, and systems. In the field of data analytics, artificial intelligence, machine learning. In the field of data governance and security, and in the field of legacy application integration as well. And with a digital production platform being a cloud-based platform, we also have a common technical foundation across all our plants, which is, to be honest, very much in contrast to the situation as we have it today, with a countless number of plant individual solutions and a very heterogeneous landscape. And with this common technical foundation across all our plants, we are able to rapidly scale up and roll out new applications worldwide across our plants. And, when we defined this vision of the digital production platform, we also immediately realized that Volkswagen is certainly not the only manufacturing company facing the challenges of digitalizing our production. And that is exactly when the idea of going beyond our walls and providing this solution to the outside world was born. And that is the industrial cloud. So, in addition to the digital production platform, the industrial cloud will be an open industry platform and ecosystem based on digital production platform technology. And being an open industry platform and ecosystem, the industrial cloud will come with our global supply chain already fully integrated and a marketplace already pre-filled with a large number of ready-to-go solutions contributed by our partners. And in terms of partner onboarding, we are already in touch with a large number of partners who are actually very interested in joining this initiative, contributing solutions to the marketplace, and getting into new business models. In terms of implementation, as an automotive manufacturer, we really know and understand how to drive technology and build platforms for our vehicles. Take the modular transverse matrix as the platform for our combustion engine vehicles, or the modular electric drive matrix as the platform for our e-vehicles, for example. Now, in IT, we're mostly on the user side of technology platforms. Our standard approach is to lower our risk through using commercial off-the-shelf platforms and build on top of those. And oftentimes, we also contract a system integrator to integrate the platform into our IT landscape. And you know, it's not that this approach is wrong or bad per se. It's just that IoT and manufacturing are different. For example, there are already more than 500 IoT platforms available out there in the market. And the field of IoT is still in a very, very early phase in terms of development. And given the complexity of production in Volkswagen, none of the already existing IoT platforms really fulfills our needs. And that is why we said we cannot just wait for a suitable platform to evolve. We have to take a different path. We have to shape technology instead of purchasing it. We have to lead and get to value as quickly as possible by building our own IoT platform, which is the digital production platform. And at the same time, we also realized that we needed a strong partner for that, to bring in the technology, capacity, and skills. Now, in a venture like that, finding the right partner is paramount. And think about it for a while. How would you find the right partner? Which criteria would you apply? So we started to work on finding the right partner for this initiative back in May 2018. And initially, we identified a set of technical, cultural, and commercial criteria that our partner needs to fulfill. On the technical side, it's certainly the availability of cutting-edge technology in the field of cloud, IoT, artificial intelligence, machine learning, and much more. But you know, it's not only the availability of technology, it's also the ability of our partner to execute, to develop and launch complex use cases in an industrial setting. On the cultural side, it's the innovative spirit of our partner. It's the willingness to conquer industry white spaces and to understand the industrial cloud as the enabler to drive innovation in the automotive industry. On the commercial side, it's the commitment to a long-term partnership at eye level. And to be honest, this also includes the willingness of our partner to invest into this. We really didn't want to go this traditional buyer-supplier kind of relationship path where we contract a supplier to build this platform for us. We really wanted this partnership to be at eye level. Now, finding the right partner for this was anything but shooting from the hip. In fact, it was a deliberate, multi-staged 12-month process. And again, we started this process back in May 2018 when we identified a set of 7 potential partners coming from different industry segments, including large hyperscale cloud providers such as AWS, industry software vendors bringing in an already existing IoT platform that we wanted to use as a basis to extend, and a standard software vendor as well. And over this course of this 12-month process, including initial exploratory workshops, strategic and technical workshops, real tangible proof of concepts in Volkswagen Group plants, and strategy design, we finally decided for AWS as our strategic partner. And we also deliberately decided to partner with a large hyperscale cloud provider. And this is because, as Volkswagen, we observed that the large hyperscale cloud providers are investing very, very heavily in building up IoT capabilities in their portfolio. And they are growing up the stack very, very quickly. That is why we said we really don't want to have a third-party platform to sit in between the innovations coming from the cloud provider and the digital production platform we were going to build. We really wanted to benefit directly from the innovations coming from the cloud provider. And this is why we selected AWS specifically and how we look at the collaboration between Volkswagen and AWS. Now, as Volkswagen, we certainly have the most complex setup you can think of. We have a very, very diverse production landscape with deep levels of supplier integration and very complex mechanical systems. We have unprecedented levels of high frequency, high volume, and high precision production processes. And we also know how to operate and run production processes in such a complex environment. And we understand the requirements that we need to implement in order to digitalize this environment. AWS, being a cloud leader, certainly have the right technology for that. And that includes on-premises and public cloud services, IoT solutions, and machine learning innovations, and much more. And equally important, being a digital native, AWS certainly also have the builder's culture and innovative spirit that it takes to really transform the manufacturing industry. Now, as an alliance, we can create tremendous global scale. We're really bringing together the best of both worlds, the manufacturing expertise from Volkswagen and the technology expertise from AWS. And currently, we are already setting up a co-development center in Berlin, Germany, where AWS and Volkswagen teams work jointly on building the digital production platform. So we started to work in our alliance back in April this year. And one of the first things we did was melting the two company cultures together. And one of the mechanisms we really liked as Volkswagen was the AWS way of working backwards from the customer. So one of the first things we did was writing a joint press release announcing the first release of the digital production platform and a narrative laying out the long-term vision of the DPP. And what you can see on the right-hand side of the slide is an extract from this press release. And don't worry, I will not bore you with reading a long text here. However, what I want to point out here is that for us as Volkswagen, the AWS way of working backwards is also one of the major game changers, because it helps us to focus on the outcome and on the benefit for the customer. Now, building the digital production platform, we realized that building a generic platform will certainly not generate value quick enough. And again, we decided to consequently leverage the AWS way of working backwards. We decided to pick and choose concrete use cases that we support And we derive the requirements for technical capabilities we implement in our platform based on the concrete requirements coming from those use cases. And by working that way, we make sure that demands drive technology and architecture and not vice versa. And just to give you an impression of the use cases we support and implement, these are two. So the first use case we support is an application we built for our press shop in Wolfsburg, Germany, the Pressline 400. And you will see a video later in the session. And this is essentially an application that generates recommendations for configuration parameters of the press, such as oiling or the pressure of the cylinders, based on recommendations generated by an artificial intelligence model trained with defectively produced output from the press. And the second application we support is an application for our component plants in Chemnitz, Germany, and Polkowice, Poland. It's called Digital Shop Floor Management Plus, or short DSFM Plus. And this is essentially a management dashboard displaying metrics from the shop floor, such as overall equipment effectiveness from our cylinder production lines. Now, for 2020 onwards, we already have a large number of additional use cases in our pipe. In fact, it's more than 140 use cases. And we deliberately pick and choose the use cases we support based on their business impact. Now, currently, we're on our way to deliver release 1 of the digital production platform. And what you can see on this slide is the target architecture of this first release. And we ship this to our plants to Wolfsburg, Germany, Chemnitz, Germany, and Polkowice, Poland. And again, don't worry, this is not going to be a long slide. In fact, if you're interested in the technical details of the digital production platform, please head over to session IoT 339. This is a session, a really cool session, delivered by our senior software development management team, Pascal Hahn from AWS and my colleague Uwe Wieland from the Software Development Center in Dresden. And this session is scheduled for tomorrow. So please consider this session. And just to give you an overview of the architecture we implement. So what we basically do is we connect our factories to the cloud. And to establish this connection, we deploy edge gateways to our factories on premises. And these edge gateways, based on technologies like AWS IoT Sidewise Gateway and AWS IoT Green Glass connectors, basically ingest data from the shop floor based on standard protocols such as OPC UA or MQTT. And as we're mostly dealing with a brownfield approach, I mean, the majority of our equipment does not support these standard protocols. As we're mostly dealing with a brownfield approach, we use OT-IT gateways to do the conversion between the individual protocol on the shop floor, such as Modbus or Profinet, and the standard protocol required by the edge gateway. Now, again, edge gateways ingest data from the shop floor and push data into the cloud where data is processed and made available for the applications. In the cloud, we're using advanced services like, for example, AWS IoT Sidewise to calculate metrics, overall equipment effectiveness, for example, and AWS IoT Analytics. We store the data in a data lake using Amazon S3 as the fabrics and AWS Lake Formation to quickly spin up new data lakes based on AWS best practices. We expose the data to our applications via common and standardized interfaces via Amazon API Gateway. Now, in terms of digital production platform adoption, we really want to drive developer efficiency. We want to free our developers from all the foundational heavy lifting and enable them to rapidly build applications on top of DPP. And our concept here is to provide a managed landing zone based on serverless technologies like AWS Lambda. Now, what you also see on this slide is the concept of a plant cloud. And this is basically an on-premise cloud component based on AWS Outposts, announced for GA earlier today. And honestly, I'm proud to announce that we already have the first installation of Outposts up and running in one of our data centers in Wolfsburg. So we need this on-premise cloud component because for certain workloads, we are not able to operate these workloads in a public cloud environment. For example, due to legal regulations for the geographies in which we operate our production sites, or due to latency requirements for our workloads. So again, we leverage AWS Outposts to extend the public cloud services from AWS to our plants. For 2020 onwards, we have identified 3 main objectives. Our first objective for 2020 is to really drive adoption of the DPP as much as possible by rolling out this basic architecture to as many plants as possible. In fact, we have 15 plants on our roadmap for 2020. Our second objective, obviously, is to extend this basic architecture. For example, in the enterprise cloud tier, we will implement higher level, more advanced services like artificial intelligence, and we will extend the production equipment tier and the industrial edge tier by building new functionalities like, for example, data filtering, pre-processing, or artificial intelligence inference. And our third objective, I already talked about the digital production platform coming with this marketplace and a large number of ready-to-go solutions. So our third objective is to prepare this architecture for onboarding of our first partners. With that said, let's have a look at how production looks like in our press shop in Wolfsburg.
Cars made by the Volkswagen Group are the result of years of development work. Every car goes through hundreds of production steps. Each new episode of this series showcases a different area of car manufacturing. Once the design of a model has been finalized, the next step is to build the pressing tools needed for the bodywork. A tool is a mold that weighs several tons and consists of 2 halves. Robots cut and shape the structures, but the finishing touches are done by hand. The pressing tools are thoroughly tested, then get down to work in the press shop. The giant coils of sheet steel come directly from the steel plant. They provide the basic raw material for the car body. The press is fitted with the molds for one car part. Then the giant machine is set in motion. For safety reasons, no one is allowed near the pressing machines. Each car's millimeter-thin lines require the highest possible precision during the pressing process, and the machines quite literally work under tons of pressure. Robot arms transport the steel sheets from one mold to the next. All tools in the pressing cycle work on the same body part, one after the other, to shape the body design in several steps. The finished parts are then destacked using ergonomic aids. The press shop is the only place where traditional series production lives on. From this point forward, each car is individually tailored to meet the wishes of the customer.
Wow. I have to admit, after 10 years with Volkswagen, this still humbles me. And with that, I'm going to hand it back to Sarah, who will talk you through the rest of the session. Thank you.
Thank you, Uli. Having stood next to that press as these things move at an incredible speed, it's really cool. And there are a wonderful set of videos that are part of this series. So if that was cool, go check out the rest of the videos. There's even a How Things Work episode on actually the steel production of those big coils. So kudos to Volkswagen for their good use of YouTube and sharing good technical information out there. So part of what Uli mentioned is kind of how we are working together, not just what we're building in the architecture, but how we're coming together to work. So he mentioned the working backwards process. There's a number of things that Amazon, of course, we define innovation with a function. Maybe I'll get my physics cred back. But basically, we talk about innovation as being architecture times organization to the power of mechanisms and culture. Anybody going to resolve that? No? All right. Part of this is really key to the delivery speed and innovation that you saw today in Andy's keynote and that you saw as part of Uli's talk. So part of the things that we're combining and adapting and adopting for DPP from the AWS Innovation Playbook, on the architecture side, self-service, right? If we're going to have developers and plant operators be able to develop on top of DPP rapidly, to be able to experiment with new opportunities to generate more value for Volkswagen continuously on digital production platform, we've got to make it self-service. And self-service means that the individual who could bring the expertise and domain expertise is able to self-serve. Not just that somebody with a PhD in computer science can self-serve. So really key piece is to think about understanding who that end customer is, who that end user is, and what do they need to be self-service with their own innovation and use cases. Of course, microservices, it's how we're able to iterate quickly in not just AWS, but also within DPP. And this idea of building twice. This is alien to a lot of our customers. How could you be inefficient? If you build twice, you are building inefficiency into the system. First, figure out which one you're going to build and build once. But at Amazon, Bezos is famous for saying, I'd rather have 2 than 0. So if 2 people have a similar idea, go for it. See what happens. Eventually, we'll figure out one will likely take off, or maybe they diverge. But at the end of the day, we'll have a solution, and it will be better for the competition of having 2. So again, we learn very quickly, and if you have that iteration, if you have the ability to self-serve, it's easier to reduce the cost of having done it twice. Organization. How many people have heard of 2 pizza teams? A few. The saying goes that a 2 pizza team is large enough to be fed by 2 pizzas. My running joke, and there are a few people who have heard this before, is I've got engineers that eat 2 pizzas by themselves, and they're not one-person teams. Typically, we're talking about anywhere from 8 to 12 engineers on a team. Now, we hire people often who have run 600-person organizations, and we tell them they've got 3 pizza teams, Wait a minute, what can I do? I need 600 people. Well, it turns out, if you do small teams and you give them autonomy to build, and you don't tell them how to do it, you tell them what you need from it. And you give them a set of leadership principles on which to make tough decisions by, they build brilliant services. Now, they often have to leverage, because you didn't give them an incredible number of people, 1, the management overhead's done, so they can GSD, get stuff done. But they also have to be scrappy about it. So they tend to use the other services as the underpinnings, which means that you're getting more and more innovation on top of what you've already invested in, because you gotta be scrappy. Another big piece of our organization is that you operate what you build. This is another tough one with our customers. Turns out, if you're the one who gets the on-call notification at 4 a.m. on Sunday, you get the call, you get paged, groggy eyes. Turns out your code quality tends to go up because you're the one on the other end of that line. Very basic sensitive alignments. On the mechanism sides, we've already talked about PRFAQs and narratives, but the general working backwards, understanding who that customer is, making sure that we spend our time understanding that problem before we dive into the technology. Again, a key piece of our co-development together. Something else, correction of errors. We tend to abbreviate that as COE. Some of you may have a COE, but it probably stands for Center of Excellence. I happen to love the fact that correction of errors and Center of Excellence resolve to the same COE. But here, it's our way of looking backwards when we understand that a mistake has happened. It's realizing what the root cause was. We ask very deep questions, call them 5 whys. You ask why the first time, then you ask why again. You keep diving deeper. Now, the point of a COE is not to find the person to blame. The point of a COE is to understand, to really learn the right lesson, and then to make it available across the organization so that nobody else makes that particular mistake again. So there are 2 things that come out of these COEs. 1, institutional knowledge, so you're not constantly repeating some of the same challenges. And 2, there's a culture of no blame. It's nobody's fault. Let's not talk about that piece. Let's understand what we needed to do differently, and let's take more risks, right? It's in a way of allowing us to learn from our mistakes without penalizing people for potentially stretching on the innovation side. Culture. There are 14 leadership principles. They start with customer obsession. You can find them online. We truly live by them. I don't know if you found yourself talking about earning trust or bias for action, but I found most of my colleagues tend to even refer to their kids. They tell them, have some bias for action when the chores aren't done. It's insidious. It just becomes part of how you talk. But language is important. And so it becomes part of how we interact together. And it gives us that basis across these disparate 2 pizza teams to come to often the same underlying conclusions. Another key one that we talk about is 2-way doors. At Amazon, we spend an awful lot of time looking at 1-way door problems. But we make 2-way door decisions very quickly. What that basically means is if you can reverse your decision, it's a 2-way door. Make it quickly. You can always go back. You learn, you go back and you change it. Much better to act fast. Bias for action. If it's a 1-way door, if it's really incredibly difficult to reverse that decision, then spend the time thinking about it. Understand what all the implications are, make the right decision so you don't have to go back and change it. Another thing that we love at Amazon is our flywheels. So part of working together, we see this kind of across digital platforms. It's why people think of digital transformation as truly transforming their business and how they deliver that business. The more solutions we're able to pull together, hence the idea of a solution marketplace, the more solutions we're able to pull together, the more value we drive for the business, more outcomes, go outcome-driven engineering. The more outcomes we have, the more we can reinvest to connect more equipment, to get more data, to get more insights from that data, broader types of equipment, broader insights, broader solutions. And this feeds into itself until you get this momentum behind the innovation that continuously drives, again, those business outcomes. So a couple of key just kind of summaries about DPP. We move from cloud to edge, edge to cloud. There are things that happen at the edge that are staying at the edge. There are things that move between the two. There are things that happen in the cloud that primarily stay in the cloud. Your workload needs to happen where it happens. We've got that built into the underlying architecture, as Uli walked through. We believe that there are some new microservices for DPP that are focused on the automotive environment. We see how we can build those together and develop those between the AWS background and our own services and our own environments, and of course, the strong technical and production background from Volkswagen. We're looking at a standardized data layer and standardized API layers. That just helps us extend. It helps make sure that we can constantly innovate on the underlying platform without having to change every single application and use case on top. And of course, if we can't bring machine and process together with people and culture and technology, we won't actually be able to sustainably change the automotive industry. So with that, here are a couple of other areas to come talk to us. Nihar, are you in? Yeah, there we go. I thought he might be in here. Thomas may not be. But the three of us are going to be part of the Manufacturing Lounge Forum here in ARIA tomorrow, 3 to 5 p.m. Come join us. We'll be answering questions, chatting, have a good time. I promise not to ask too many hands-up questions. And as Uli mentioned, there's a deep dive, technical deep dive from Pascal and Uwe tomorrow as well. That one's in MGM, so don't come back here. The money slide. Surprise! We're hiring. Both on the Volkswagen side as well as on AWS side. So if you're interested, you know folks who would be interested. There's the links to both of our job boards and keyword DPP or IoT. You can find the roles where we're hiring, primarily in Berlin, but of course we're both hiring globally. So if you are just really excited to learn more about manufacturing, you'll see a whole bunch of other sessions. Feel free to take a picture there. Many of these, including this session, will also be available on YouTube. So that happens every year if you haven't been to reInvent before. In fact, you were a speaker last year, right?
I was.
Yep. So you can see the difference between a year. And with that, thank you very much. And last but not least, please fill out your session surveys. And thank you very much.